Hey everyone, I'm going to introduce you to a work by Christian Marclay, an American artist whose practice is quite broad-ranging but very centered around sound and music. And that's something quite interesting about Marclay's work, if you look into it, that it attends to sound as an experiential, social, and cultural phenomenon through a variety of forms, through sculptural work, photo-based work, video, and performance. In many cases, the work doesn't even have a time-based audio component, but sound is almost always at the center of the work. Marclay started working with turntables and records in the 1970s, exploring experimental techniques not unlike those of DJ and hip-hop culture. His own use of turntables and records was developed roughly parallel to, but separate from, the development of DJ and hip-hop culture, and was part of a very experimental music and media art scene in New York City. This was also the time of the development of punk music in places like New York City, and Marclay's work from this period reflects the influence of punk, where the boundary between music and noise becomes particularly important as a form of social commentary, where, in punk, noise is an expression of, something like a rejection of social convention. Anyway, before getting into the details of this specific work of Marclay's, let's watch the video, which is just 3 minutes in length. So, what's happening here? The title is a pun, right? Which encapsulates the kind of unconventional method of the performance, where we think about a record player as a technological device, a machine that translates marks etched into the surface of a record into amplified audio signal. In this video, the players are people who treat the record not as a recording, a technical object, but rather as an instrument, exploring the sounds that can be made by playing the records as though they are hand percussion instruments. So records are scratched, flapped in the air, rubbed together, and broken. Which, as an aside, might call to mind the way performers interact with objects in today's ASMR videos on YouTube. But there's a kind of destructive irreverence in Marclay's work, right? It's a very noisy and destructive form of composition or play. So maybe we can also think about it as a commentary or disavowal of the conventions of use of the record. Maybe even having something to do with the commodification of music as a social form. Thinking about the record as a commodity object. And in terms of form, one thing we could pay attention to here would be the associative qualities of sound. That some sounds are more or less suggestive or open to interpretation. We could close our eyes and think about the various objects and actions that we could associate with what we're hearing. The sounds of the fingers rubbing the records communicates the texture of the object, but also there are, physical and psychological associations around scratching that come up. The breaking of the records gives us information about the object as a material thing, that is rigid and brittle, but also suggests a transgressive action of some kind, a disruption, an accident, or a violent act. So maybe we could also think about record players as a kind of abstract portrait of an object, the record. That might be something to keep in mind as you gather sounds for your audio postcard assignment. Following Marclay's example, you might think about how to tell your audience about something by treating it as unfamiliar or approaching it in an unconventional way. A question to ask yourself might be, what can you learn or show about something by approaching it differently than you normally would? Okay, I think I'll leave you there. You'll find links to Marclay's work below.